morning, and welcome back to another episode of the Red Chip Poker Podcast. My name is James Sweeney, aka Split Suit, and I'm one of the co-founders here at Red Chip Poker. This episode sits between seasons and is an exclusive audio preview of our new book, The Exploitative Edge. Today's chapter dives into exploitative strategy, showing you how to adjust and punish weaker opposition at the tables. When this episode goes live, I'll still be working on the full audiobook version, but the paperback and ebook versions are available now. Just visit redchippoker.com/edge, that's EDGE, to get your copy. Links for both are in the description box. And now, let's jump into Chapter 4, titled Exploitative Strategy. Enjoy! In an ideal world, we would always know the EV, or expected value, of every poker decision. The game would be easy. We would simply pick whichever decision had the highest EV. As we will see in the second part of this book, we can create some fairly sharp estimates regarding river EV. Some of our best exploits will occur on the river as a result. As we move backward to the earlier streets, however, calculating our EV becomes exponentially more complex. This is because calculating EV on earlier streets involves taking into account all possible actions and board runouts for the latter streets. This is not something humans can calculate by hand. This does not mean we are left entirely in the dark regarding our EV, as we'll discuss shortly. However, we clearly need a system for making the best exploitative decisions in situations where our EV is not explicitly known. We will refer to this component of our game as exploitative strategy. Engineering our preflop play in the previous chapter to target weaker players is an example of exploitative strategy. We will eventually reach a point in the hand where the EVs of our respective decisions become clear. We will then be able to plot a path to the end of our hand, choosing whichever path generates the highest EV. We will refer to this component of our game as exploitative tactics. Exploitative strategies. While we cannot provide an exhaustive list of exploitative strategies, the following pointers should lay the foundation for a very strong framework. This framework will outperform a GTO approach against weak opposition. We may need to tailor our approach when facing regs or elite reg opponents, something we'll expand upon more in the following chapter. Strategy number 1. Big hands equal big pots. We should start growing the size of the pot on early streets if we have a made hand that is strong enough to either bet all 3 streets for value or play for stacks. We have a nut draw, or close to it, that's strong enough to play for stacks if it hits. We are on the flop and have high quality, nutted backdoor equity. We do not want to be in a river situation where we have the stone cold nuts, but we still need to make a huge overbet in order to get our stack in. We would prefer to have somewhere in the region of a pot-sized bet remaining, or smaller overbets can also be fine. We may need to make use of large bet sizing, including overbets on the earlier streets, to achieve this objective. Strategy 2. Dominated hands equal small pots. We should limit the size of the pot if we have an extremely weak hand, such as total air without any backdoors. We have a mid-strength hand, and as a rough guide, a mid-strength hand is any one-pair hand lower than top pair good kicker on a board where there is no straight or flush possible. On a board where there are 3 cards to a straight or flush, a mid-strength hand is any top pair or weak 2-pair combo. We have a draw or backdoor equity that is likely to be dominated if it hits and will not be able to stack off comfortably. Examples include the low end of a gut shot, a 7-high flush draw, and similar. In these situations, we limit the size of the pot by checking and or using smaller bet sizings. Of course, this is just a baseline strategy. We need to counterbalance it with the following principles. 1. It's correct to attack certain flops with air in many player pools, and 2. It's correct to aggressively protect mid-strength hands if they are vulnerable to being outdrawn. Strategy 3. Protect vulnerable hands. A mid-strength hand should be considered vulnerable if it's likely to be outdrawn on turn or river cards. If our mid-strength hand is vulnerable, we generally prefer our opponent to fold even if their hand might sometimes be weaker than ours. This is a concept referred to as equity denial. It's an extremely important concept that underpins the entire game of poker, even at the highest levels of competition. Many players mistakenly believe that we should only bet if we can either get called by worse hands or fold out better hands. This is not true, and making this error puts a cap on the quality of our game. If we bet a vulnerable mid-strength hand, and our opponent folds a worse hand that may have outdrawn us, this is a good outcome. A mid-strength hand should be considered vulnerable in a flop or turn situation if it meets the following criteria. 1. It's a pair of 9s or lower. 2. It has no direct draws or backdoor draws to go with it. 3. It's a top pair or 2-pair hand with 3 to a flush or straight on the board. and 4, it's a weak top pair and the board is drawy. If our mid-strength hand is classified as vulnerable based upon the previous criteria, it's usually good to bet or raise assuming any of the following is true. 1, we have the initiative. 2, we're facing a bet on the flop or turn and we're in position. 3, we're on the turn and the flop was checked through. Or 4, we're on the flop or turn and our opponent checked to us. Hand strength rules still apply. For example, we should usually not protect a second pair of 9s if a 3 flush or 3 straight is completed. Our hand is now too weak to be considered mid-strength according to criteria we outlined earlier in this chapter. Strategy 4. Showdown non-vulnerable hands. Mid-strength hands which are not likely to be outdrawn can be classified as non-vulnerable holdings. A hand can be considered non-vulnerable if it meets any of the following criteria. 1, it's a pair below top pair of 10s or higher. 2, it's a top pair of 10s and higher on a dry texture. Or 3, it has a direct draw or strong backdoor draw to go with it. In most cases, we should be looking to get to showdown with our mid-strength, non-vulnerable holdings rather than playing aggressively. Our opponent is less likely to outdraw our non-vulnerable holdings, so equity denial is less valuable. The principle of keeping the pot small with mid-strength holdings now takes priority. Non-vulnerable mid-strength hands make excellent bluff catchers. As a rough guide, we can be bluff catching across at least 2 streets. This is also true of non-vulnerable top pair type hands, although these should attempt to extract 2 streets of value if our opponent does not appear interested in betting. Strategy 5. Avoid high variance, low confidence spots. We should try to avoid investing large amounts of chips in situations where our EV is either marginal or unclear. It might appear that good players always know their EV in every situation, but this is not the case. Rather, good players know where the EV is clearly defined and where the EV is unclear. Weaker players are uncomfortable with not knowing and tend to try and fill in the gaps with assumptions that lack a solid basis. It is okay to not know. Seriously, repeat that again. It is okay to not know. If we can honestly evaluate a situation's profitability, we will be able to make better investments. When the EV is clear, we invest more chips. When our confidence regarding the EV is low, we can deliberately make the decision to invest less. Unsure whether you should be making that river bluff catch for your entire stack? Then tend towards folding. That is a classic example of a high variance, low confidence spot. Pure GTO players will take exception to this principle. If we always tend towards folding in high variance, unorthodox situations, we become susceptible to being pushed around. And that might be true, but keep the following in mind. 1. If the EV is unclear, it often means the EV is close to 0, assuming our judgment is on point. This is MAD territory. Even if we make the right decision, we still might end up losing to the rake. 2. Assuming we are close to break even after the rake, our win rate will not improve, only our variance. We will see an increase in downswings and upswings. Swings often impact negatively on mindset. The quality of future decisions may suffer due to mental game issues or tilt. Thus, breaking even starts to become negative EV. This is not to say that we are on a mission to avoid any sort of variance. We should be very comfortable embracing high variance strategies so long as we are confident that the EV gain is worthwhile. Strategy 6. Favor post-flop play. When there are lots of chips remaining for post-flop play, the better players can make bigger use of their skill edge. As an example, compare the following 2 scenarios. 1. A donk stacks off with bottom pair against our set in a 4-bet pot. The SPR is low, around 2. Scenario 2. A donk stacks off with bottom pair against our set in a single raise pot. The SPR is high this time, around 20. Although our opponent is arguably making a mistake in both scenarios, the size of the mistake is much larger in the single raise pot. We are generating a huge return on a small preflop investment. It's possible to sustain large win rates this way while reducing rate costs. Many cash game players have realized the value of such an approach intuitively and may sometimes use the term small ball. This should not be confused with passive play. Aggression is hugely important due to the benefits of equity denial. But if we can keep the pot smaller on average until we have the goods, this can be extremely effective against weak opposition. In theory, a high SPR on the flop is better for the player who has position. Part of the metagame of poker involves preventing the in-position player from playing too many hands when the SPR is high. This is only a concern if our opponent is skilled enough to actually make use of their positional advantage. Against donk and fish opponents, the high SPR will still often favor us, even if we are out of position. Final pointers. Our recreational opponents will often allow us to meet these strategic objectives fairly consistently without putting up too much resistance. We do not want to be overly concerned about balance, since it will limit the effectiveness of our exploitative approach. On the other hand, advanced opponents may actively prevent us from reaching these strategic objectives. We may need to make our exploits less obvious if they're going to be effective. We will discuss playing against advanced opponents in the next chapter. And that's a wrap on this chapter. If you want more, get your copy of the Exploitative Edge today by visiting redchippoker.com/edge. That's EDGE. You can also search for it on Amazon if you prefer paperback. Again, links for both are in the description box. As always, thank you so much for hanging out today. I'll see you back soon enough with a new episode, and in the meantime, good luck out there and happy grinding.